Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. The first topic for today is rat hole mining, and the article related to it can be found on the front page of the Delhi edition. Just yesterday, we took up a practice question related to rat hole mining. So today, let's talk about the topic in complete detail. See, the practice of rat hole mining is prevalent in the state of Meghalaya, and it has to do with coal extraction. So before we proceed with the discussion, first let's understand the distribution of coal resources in India. See, in India, coal reserves are distributed across three important locations. Two of them are concentrated in the central and eastern parts of India, whereas the other one is found in the northeast of India. The most predominant coal belt in India stretches across Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, parts of Odisha and West Bengal. The other belt stretches across Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, parts of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. The third coal belt can be found stretching across Meghalaya and Assam. Apart from coal reserves, India also has lignite reserves found in parts of Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Rajasthan and Jammu and Kashmir. Amongst all these coal reserves, the reserves found in the central and eastern part of India is the most economically viable, because in this region, the coal seams are very thick and hence heavy machinery can be deployed and a mining technique known as open cast mining can be practiced. Whereas in the northeast of India, particularly in Meghalaya, that is in the Garo, Kasi, Jaintia hill region, industrial coal mining is not economically viable for a couple of reasons. One, the coal seams found in Meghalaya is very thin, and as a result, heavy machinery cannot be deployed and open cast mining cannot be practiced, and it is not possible to remove the rocks from the hilly terrain and set up pillars inside the caves to prevent the mine from collapsing. Such industrial mining techniques are costlier and they are not economically viable in the Meghalaya region. Then two, Meghalaya is a 6th scheduled state. As a result, most of the land where coal reserves are found, they are owned by indigenous communities, and hence the ownership of these reserves rests with individuals and private communities. So these two factors make industrial coal mining in Meghalaya economically unviable, and hence the local indigenous communities have developed their own traditional way of mining coal that is known as rat hole mining. Under this locally developed technique, very small and narrow tunnels are dug through the hillside, and these tunnels are hardly 3 to 4 feet high and 4 to 5 feet in diameter. Basically, these tunnels are just wide enough to fit one human being at a time. And through these narrow tunnels, workers, especially children, they crawl through the tunnels and they extract the coal. Later, these mines branch into several networks of horizontal channels, and due to the lack of mechanical or physical support, it significantly increases the risk of a mine collapse or the flooding of these mines, especially during the rainy season. So when such disasters happen, a number of workers get trapped under these mines, and hence rat hole mining is considered to be a major occupational hazard. Plus, this technique of mining is extremely hazardous to the environment as well, and as a result, the National Green Tribunal had banned rat hole mining in 2014. The NGT had considered rat hole mining to be unscientific and unsafe for the workers, and it also took into account the severe environmental impact of rat hole mining and decided to ban this type of mining in 2014. But despite this ban, the practice has continued because of poor enforcement by the Meghalaya government, and as a result, the risk for the environment and the workers continues to remain the same. Environmental experts and human rights activists have always criticized rat hole mining for its disastrous impact. Rat hole mining is known to contribute to the leaching of toxic metals into the nearby water bodies, and as a result, the nearby lakes and rivers, they turn acidic. Studies have shown that the water bodies present in and around the areas where rat hole mining is practiced have reported a very high concentration of sulfates, iron and several other toxic heavy metals. And they also report very low dissolved oxygen and high biological oxygen demand, along with a very high pH value, thereby indicating its degraded quality. So excessive water pollution caused by rat hole mining is a major risk to the aquatic life and as well as to the human beings. Plus, the coal and the rocky material that is dumped on the roadside becomes a major source of air, water and soil pollution and degrades the nearby environment. Then upon this, the movement of heavy vehicles and trucks, especially in unpaved areas, that is off-road areas, releases a lot of dust into the atmosphere, thereby causing significant air pollution and causing damage to the nearby ecology and environment. Then along with this, the risk of caving of these mines and flooding of mines increases the risk for the workers, especially for children, most of whom are victims of child trafficking. So considering the environmental risk and the risk posed to the safety of workers, the National Green Tribunal had banned rat hole mining, and this decision was upheld by the Supreme Court as well. Environmental activists and human rights activists have consistently taken a stand against rat hole mining, but despite this, the Meghalaya government has failed to enforce the ban, and it has also failed to come out with an effective policy to regulate rat hole mining. So this article on page number 1 refers to an initiative taken by a village in Meghalaya in the East Jaintia Hills district, through which the local villagers have voluntarily taken up afforestation and planting of grass initiatives in order to counter the environmental impact of rat hole mining. Now let's take up an editorial from page number 6. India has criticized the United Nations Alliance of Civilization and its Culture of Peace program for adopting religion-based selectivity while condemning religious hatred and religious violence. In fact, we had covered this topic briefly just a couple of days ago, but today let's have a more detailed discussion. See, the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations was established in 2005 at the initiative of Spain and Turkey. The objective of this alliance is to prevent religious polarization around the world and to act against any communal developments that seek to target other minority religions. So its core objective is to act against religious hatred and religious violence against other minority religions. But it has been observed that over the last 14 to 15 years, the UN Alliance has been very selective when it comes to condemning religious hatred and violence. It has always sought to condemn religious hatred and violence targeted against Abrahamic religions such as Islam, Christianity and Judaism. The UN Alliance of Civilizations has always taken a firm stand against Islamophobia and as well as against Christianophobia and anti-Semitism. It has repeatedly criticized such acts of religious violence and hatred, and it has even adopted numerous resolutions in this regard, which has been supported even by the UN General Assembly. But however, when it comes to religious hatred and religious violence against non-Abrahamic religions, such as Hinduism, Buddhism and Sikhism, the UN Alliance has largely remained silent, and it points to its selective approach towards Abrahamic religions. The objective of this alliance has been to promote religious and communal harmony in order to prevent a clash of the civilizations. But instead, by adopting a selective approach towards Abrahamic religions, the UN Alliance has largely neglected the non-Abrahamic religions. So during the latest Culture of Peace Summit of the UN Alliance of Civilizations, India has made use of the opportunity to point out this selective religion-based bias of the UN and its agencies. The Indian delegate has highlighted numerous instances of religious hatred and violence being faced by these non-Abrahamic religions, especially in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. Minority Hindus, minority Buddhists and even minority Sikhs in the AFPAK region, they have been targeted with ethnic cleansing, and they have even faced numerous terror attacks and religious violence, which has threatened the safety and the very existence of these religious minorities in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Be it the selective targeting of minority Hindus and Hindu temples, or be it the bombing of Sikh Gurudwaras, or be it the destruction of the Bamyan Buddha statues in Afghanistan, the Afghanistan-Pakistan region has been witness to all such acts of religious hatred and religious violence. But in most of these instances, the UN Alliance of Civilizations and other UN bodies, they have failed to criticize these acts of religious hatred and violence. And according to India, this points to their selective approach towards Abrahamic religions and their neglect of non-Abrahamic religions. India has also used this opportunity to call out Pakistan for its direct role in sponsoring acts of religious hatred and violence against the non-Abrahamic religions in the region. India has pointed out how Pakistan has encouraged cross-border terrorism against India and how it has turned geopolitical issues into religion-based terror and insurgent movements. The best examples include the Kashmir insurgency and the Khalistan movement. India has pointed out that Pakistani state agencies have played a direct role in the targeting of religious minorities belonging to non-Abrahamic faiths, and it has used the Kartarpur Sahib corridor as an example to highlight Pakistan's majoritarianism. See, the development of the Kartarpur Sahib corridor was a landmark diplomatic initiative between India and Pakistan to connect two sacred Sikh Gurudwaras located across the border. But as per the agreement between India and Pakistan, the corridor was supposed to be administered by the Prabandhak Committee. As per the agreement, the state, that is the government of India and the government of Pakistan, they were supposed to have a very limited role in managing the Kartarpur Sahib corridor and the Kartarpur Gurudwara. But contradictory to these commitments made by Pakistan, its government has recently taken over the management of the Sikh shrine, which directly contradicts the religious faith of the Sikh community. But despite such grave acts of religious and communal polarization by the Pakistani state, the UN agencies have failed to condemn Pakistan, and hence India has criticized the UN Alliance of Civilizations, for its selective approach towards condemning only hatred and violence targeted against Abrahamic religions. India has called upon the UN to adopt a secular approach and provide equal treatment for the non-Abrahamic religions as well. So in the context of this development, the editorial is of the opinion that India's criticism targeted against the UN and its agencies is quite valid and justified, because India's argument holds true that the UN and its agencies have often ignored religious hatred and violence targeted against the non-Abrahamic religions. So this criticism by India of the UN and its agencies is quite valid and justified, and India would like to push back against the UN institutions when it occupies the non-permanent member seat at the UN Security Council in January 2021. India's criticism of the UN and its agencies on these grounds become all the more valid and justified because of its moral standing in this regard. The true force behind India's criticism is drawn from its constitutional values, which are inherently secular, and this moral standing of India is based on its pluralistic ethos, which has been an integral part of the Indian civilization. Indian civilizational values of pluralism and secularism have of course found their way into the Indian Constitution as well, and the pluralistic and secular nature of the Indian Constitution is what gives India the moral standing to raise this genuine criticism against the UN and its agencies. So India would be looking to push back against the UN and its agencies with regard to these matters, especially considering the fact that the UN Alliance of Civilizations and the UNHRC have repeatedly targeted India over the last couple of years over the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act and as well as over the recent Delhi riots. But however, the editorial makes a very important observation. While India's criticism of the UN is justified, it needs to keep in mind that its own policies and laws of late are appearing to be targeted against a particular religion. Be it the Citizenship Amendment Act, which provides for religion-based exclusion, or be it the controversial interfaith marriage laws that are being brought out by the state governments, or be it the extensive communal polarization that has been seen in the Indian society over the last few years, India appears to be losing its moral standing because of its deviation from its secular constitutional ethos. So the argument of the editorial is that if India's voice against such discrimination at the global level should be heard, and if it has to be treated as valid and justified, then it needs to strengthen its moral standing, and this has to be done by displaying a firm commitment with regard to government laws and policies towards India's constitutional ethos and secular pluralistic values. Otherwise, it would provide an opportunity for countries like Pakistan and biased agencies of the UN to call out India for its hypocritical approach. Now let's take up a column from page number 6 that evaluates the 4 new labor codes that have been brought out by the government. See, we have discussed the 4 new labor codes repeatedly over the last few months. But however, let's take a look at the argument that is being presented by the authors in this column. See, the main objective of any labor code is to secure a set of rights to the employee, that is to the workers, and to mandate the employer to take up a set of responsibilities in order to guarantee these rights and welfare to the employees. So naturally, any labor code creates a conflict between the employer and the employee, and it is the government's job to strike a balance between these two conflicting objectives. The employees or the workers hope that labor codes will secure them basic welfare, provide for minimum wages, ensure their social security, and grant them basic rights. but the employer expects the labor codes to provide for ease of doing business in order to reduce the complexities and the cost involved in delivering these welfare measures. So with the intention of revising and updating India's numerous labor-related laws, the government came out with 4 new labor codes, and it has claimed that these new labor codes enables ease of doing business for the employers and at the same time guarantees welfare, social security and rights to the employees. The government has stated that these new labor codes, they try to universalize the right to minimum wage and they guarantee basic social security to the workers. But however, these new labor codes have witnessed a lot of opposition, especially from the labor unions, and the column tries to evaluate the reasons behind this opposition. The column does acknowledge that the government is trying to universalize the right to minimum wage and it is trying to widen the reach of social security, but however, there are a number of flaws in its approach. First, let's talk about the promise of the government for providing universal social security. See, social security is nothing but the provision of insurance, pensions, provident fund, etc., which ensures the welfare of the workers. The new laws mandates the employer to provide for ESI and PF coverage to the workers by making a mandated contribution to the employee state insurance and the provident fund. While the government claims that this social security measure is universal in nature, covering all the workers, but in reality, this provision applies for only those establishments which employ more than 10 workers. So this means that the unorganized sector, that is the informal sector, is completely left out. And in a country like India, where a large part of the economy is run by the informal sector, nearly 80% of the employees get left out of the benefits. And these benefits of ESI and PF shall be available only to 20% of the workers who actually fall under the formal sector. So the authors state that as a result of this exclusion, a number of informal workers such as domestic helps, drivers, street vendors, delivery boys, platform workers, etc., they would be left out of the coverage, and hence it directly affects the welfare of millions of workers in the country. Even though the new laws provide for ESI hospital coverage to all the workers can avail these healthcare services only after paying a certain charge. Then upon this, the authors also highlight the inadequacies and the lack of capacity of the ESI hospital infrastructure. See, currently, under the Employee State Insurance Corporation hospitals or the ESI hospitals, around 2.1 crore workers were covered as of 2016. This number has increased to 3.6 crore workers by 2019. And with enhanced coverage under the new laws, which covers 20% of the workforce, the numbers are expected to increase to around 10 crore workers or 10 crore beneficiaries under the ESI hospital network. But currently, the ESI hospital infrastructure is completely incapable of meeting this demand, because presently the doctor ratio at ESI hospitals stands at just 6 doctors per 1 lakh workers, whereas the WHO prescribed standard is 100 doctors for 1 lakh population. So this stark divide in the availability of doctors and the right kind of healthcare infrastructure will affect the delivery of healthcare services to the employees and the workers. Then upon this, in order to promote ease of doing business for the employers, the government had reduced the employer plus employee contribution to the ESI from 6.5% to 4% last year. So this reduction in ESI contribution is contrary to the demand, because due to enhanced coverage under the ESI network under the new laws, nearly 6 crore additional beneficiaries are expected to be added, and the current infrastructure, especially that of availability of doctors, would simply not be sufficient to match up to the new demand. So the need of the hour was to increase the capacity of the ESI hospitals and provide for more resources and increase the employer contribution. But contrary to that, the ESI contribution has been reduced to the employer in the name of ease of doing business, and upon that, the coverage has been restricted to only 20% of the workforce, leaving behind the rest of the 80% who fall under the informal sector. Then upon this, the new laws failed to address the regional divide in the coverage of ESI. In advanced and industrialized states such as Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, the coverage is already at 20%, which is the stated coverage under the new laws as well. But however, in backward and underdeveloped states such as Bihar, the coverage stands at just 0.7%, and the new codes do not provide any provisions to address this regional divide. Then along with this, the new codes removes cess-based welfare schemes, which was extremely beneficial for workers in small sectors such as the BD workers. For example, for the welfare of BD workers, a BD worker welfare board had been constituted, and this board was being run by money collected through a separate cess that was being imposed. Through this board, a number of welfare services were being provided to BD workers and their families, which included educational services, healthcare services, etc. But now, with the removal of such cess-based welfare schemes, workers from small sectors such as the BD workers won't be able to enjoy such welfare benefits anymore. Then coming to the promise of universal minimum wage, currently the system covers only 30% of the workforce under minimum wages. So under the new codes, the government has made an ambitious commitment to enhance the coverage to 100% or to provide for universal minimum wages. While this is an ambitious objective, the provision of minimum wages themselves are completely insufficient to address the economic realities of today. See, over the last few months, the Labour Minister has said that the minimum wage might be set at 178 rupees per day. The Finance Minister has claimed that the minimum wage might be set at 202 rupees per day. Both these commitments of the government fall way short of the recommendations of the Labour Ministry's Expert Committee on Wages that was set up in 2019, which had recommended a minimum wage of 375 rupees per day. This is also way below the poverty line family expenditure estimate that was provided by the Rangarajan Committee in 2011. So the promise of minimum wage, which is being made by senior ministers, is hardly half of what was recommended by these committees. Then upon this, the new labour codes restricts the right of the labour unions and the worker unions to strike and protest, and it also makes it easier for the employer to close down the factory in adverse circumstances. So basically, the new labour codes restricts the basic rights of the employee, and it provides for more relaxations to the employer with regard to his obligations and responsibilities. So this is being seen as a further erosion of the rights of the workers and the employees. So as a result of these flaws in the new labour codes, the authors label them as a mirage that is being sold as a panacea for the unorganized sector. According to them, the labour codes have been designed only to improve India's ease of doing business ranking and enable the employers to make it easier to run businesses and factories, and it does not focus upon improving the conditions and the welfare of the employees and the workers. Now let's take up a column from page number 7 that deals with a controversial advisory that has been issued by the Press Council of India. The Press Council of India has advised Indian newspapers and Indian media outlets to strictly regulate and verify any foreign news item or any foreign content that they might be publishing through their media platforms. Reportedly, the Press Council of India has issued this advisory based on advice received from the government, which is basically a reference to inputs that have been received from certain government agencies. Based on this input of the government, the Press Council of India has felt that such free circulation of foreign news and foreign content on Indian media platforms is not desirable, and hence it has called upon the media outlets to strictly regulate and verify the unregulated circulation of foreign news and foreign content. The advisory of the Press Council of India also states that the responsibility for verifying falls on the reporter, the publisher and the editor, and possibly they could be held accountable in case of any breaches. Now, according to the writer, this is a very alarming development because the Press Council of India is supposed to function as a watchdog. See, the Press Council of India was established in 1966 as a statutory body by passing a dedicated law, and it was supposed to function as an independent institution with a twofold objective. Its primary objective is to promote journalistic ethics amongst Indian newspapers and Indian media outlets, and the second objective was to defend the freedom of the press and the freedom of independent expression from any possible assault on this fundamental right from the government. After being established as a statutory independent institution, the Press Council was functioning in a very independent autonomous manner, and this led to the abolition of the institution during the dark days of the emergency. When the Indira Gandhi government had imposed the emergency, and when the government was seeking to regulate the media content, it repealed the PCI Act and abolished the institution, as the government felt the Press Council of India was defending media rights and it was defending the freedom of press. So this was no doubt a dark chapter in the Indian democracy because it marked a direct assault on the freedom of expression and as well as on the freedom of press. Then following the emergency, the Janata government re-established the Press Council of India in 1978 by introducing another law, and this independent institution is usually chaired by a retired Supreme Court judge, and it also consists of 28 additional members who represent various media outlets. They are also drawn from the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, and several other eminent personalities are also included in the Press Council of India. So the mandate of this watchdog is to maintain equidistance from the government and the press and from all the stakeholders, and to function in an independent manner in order to promote journalistic ethics amongst the newspapers and the media outlets and ensure that accurate, verified and fact-based news items are published. At the same time, the watchdog also has the responsibility to protect the media and its freedom of press from any possible assault by the government. So in this regard, the independent institution is supposed to maintain equidistance from the government and as well as from the media. So the argument of the writer is that before issuing such an advisory, the PCI should have considered the reasons behind the publication of foreign news content in Indian newspapers and in Indian media outlets. See, for any media outlet to have a global presence and to appoint global correspondents, it would take tremendous resources and tremendous amount of capital. And especially Indian newspapers and Indian media outlets, they are affected by a resource crunch. And since they cannot afford to have a global presence on their own, they enter into syndicated arrangements with reputed news agencies and media outlets of the world. For example, Indian newspapers and Indian publications have tied up with global news agencies such as Reuters, Associated Press, AFP, etc., all of which are reputed international news agencies. Similarly, they also have syndicated arrangements with reputed media organizations of the world such as New York Times, Guardian, BBC, Washington Post, etc. So wherever it is not possible for the Indian media outlets to have a global correspondent, they rely upon the content and the news articles provided through such syndicated arrangements. But usually, the government and the government agencies do not see this arrangement in positive light because most of the reports that comes from the foreign press and from the foreign news agencies seems to be critical of the Indian government. But this cannot be a reason to issue such an advisory which has been designed to target the freedom of press and limit the publication of foreign news content in Indian media platforms. See, when such a syndicated arrangement is worked out, the newspapers and the media outlets believe that the basic fact-checking is already done by the reputed media agencies. And moreover, if the Indian newspapers had the resources to cross-check the articles, then they themselves would have been in a position to deploy global correspondents without the need for such syndicated arrangements. So it is basic economics which provides the ground for such syndicated arrangements. And this is a practice seen not just in India, but around the world as well. But however, the PCI's advisory against the publication of such foreign content and its mandate of regulating the circulation of such content by placing the responsibility on the reporter, publisher and the editor is nothing short of an assault on the freedom of press and the media, because the PCI is not bound in any way to act upon the advisories of the government. So this clearly marks a dilution in the independence of the Press Council of India, and it is in stark contrast to the emergency days during which the PCI had strongly defended the freedom of press against any assault from the government, which eventually led to its abolition. So when the PCI was reinstated, the objective of the government was that the PCI will function independently as a neutral watchdog. But by issuing such a controversial advisory based on inputs from the government, the PCI has led to the dilution of its independence, and it also amounts to a direct assault on the freedom of press. Next, we have another editorial on page number 6 that deals with the latest monetary policy that was brought out by the Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI. But we have already covered this topic in complete detail on the 5th of December. So I would request you to go back and watch this analysis and go through the editorial once. Now let's take up the practice questions for today. What is the primary purpose of establishing elephant corridors? To promote breeding of elephants, to provide for stress-free migration of elephants from one reserve to another, to protect elephants from wildfires and poachers, to promote elephant-centric ecotourism. The correct answer is option B. Elephant corridors are set up between two protected areas or between two reserve areas in order to provide for the stress-free migration of elephants, because elephants are migratory in nature. Let's look at the next question. Which of the following statements are correct? The Asian Nature Conservation Foundation is a UN body working towards conservation of biodiversity in Asia. It is actively involved in India in the conservation of the Asian elephant. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect, because the Asian Nature Conservation Foundation is not a UN body. It is a not-for-profit organization that is based out of India, which was set up with the leadership of the Indian Institute of Science. It works actively in India in the field of biodiversity conservation, and it is primarily involved in the conservation of the Asian elephant. So the second statement is correct, and hence option B is the right answer. These two questions were asked because we have an article on page number 4 that makes a reference to elephant corridors and the Asian Nature Conservation Foundation. Now let's take up the next question. Which of the following locations are famous for their stone chariots? Is it the UNESCO World Heritage Monuments at Hampi, or the Sun Temple at Konark, or the Rocket Temples at Mahabalipuram? All the three are correct, and hence option D is the right answer. This question has been asked because we have an article on page number 8 that makes a reference to the stone chariot at Hampi, which can be found at the Vijayavitala temple that is a part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site group of monuments at Hampi. These monuments at Hampi, including the stone chariot, they reflect the rich temple architecture that was allowed to flourish under the patronage of the Vijayanagara rulers between the 14th and 17th centuries. In India, there are 3 such famous stone chariots, and apart from the one at Hampi, we also have 2 more at Konark in Odisha and at Mahabalipuram in Tamil Nadu. Let's look at the next question. The Bannerghatta National Park is located on the outskirts of which city? Chennai, Tirupati, Bengaluru or Mysore? The correct answer is option C, Bengaluru. This question has been asked because we have an article on page number 8 that refers to the adoption of animals at the Bannerghatta National Park located on the outskirts of Bengaluru. Let's look at the next question. What was the objective behind the enactment of the Roshni Act of Jammu and Kashmir? The correct answer is option A. The Roshni Act of Jammu and Kashmir has been reported in an article on page number 9 in relation to an ongoing case at the High Court. Let's look at the next question. Which fighter aircraft is currently operated by the Indian Navy on its aircraft carrier? Is it the Sukhoi 30 MKI, the Rafale fighter jet, the MiG-29K or the LCA Tejas? The correct answer is option C, MiG-29K. This question has been asked because we have a related article on page number 8. According to this article, the Indian Navy wants to tie up with the Indian Air Force while shopping for the next fighter jet which can be used for operations on India's aircraft carriers. Let's look at the next question. Which of the following are considered to be directed energy weapons? Laser-based weapons, microwave energy weapons or particle beam-based weapons? All the three are correct. Option C is the right answer. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 11, an investigation conducted by the United States has most likely pointed towards the usage of microwave energy based weapons which made US officials ill in Cuba and China. Let's look at the next question. The Manama Dialogue is a forum that is focused on the security and foreign policy issues of which region? The correct answer is option B, the Middle East region. See, the Manama Dialogue is held at Manama, the capital of Bahrain, and it is a security forum quite similar to the Raisina Dialogue of India or the Shangri-La Dialogue that is held in Singapore. This question has been asked because we have an article on page number 11 that makes a reference to the Manama Dialogue which was recently held. Now let's take up a question from the 2018 prelims paper. International Labour Organization or ILO conventions number 138 and 182 are related to child labour. Option A is the right answer. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, write a detailed note on rat hole mining and its environmental impact. The second question, India's stand against UN selectivity on religious hatred and violence gains force from its secular credentials enshrined in the Constitution and its pluralistic ethos. Discuss. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.